Hello, and welcome to Candidates Up Front. This is a public interest program of Berks Community Television and the League of Women Voters of Berks County. I'm Judith Cranis. Our November 4th municipal election is coming up, and voters will be selecting judges, school directors, township officials, borough officials, city officials, and these officials affect a lot of things in our lives. Most importantly, they decide how our tax dollars are spent. That's important to all of us. So if you are eligible to vote and you are not registered, please register by the deadline of October 20th. You can do that at the Berks County Services Center, which is on Court Street in downtown Reading, or you can do it online. Online, please make sure you are using the official site for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Search for PA.gov, that's PA and then that little period, and then gov, and then go to the search bar and put in voting, and that will take you to the website. You can check your voting status, you can register to vote, you can change your party, you can locate your polling place, or you can apply for an absentee or a mail-in ballot. And the deadline to apply for that mail-in ballot is October 28th. Now, let me just note that that doesn't give you a lot of time to receive it and get it back, so I would do it earlier. Everyone who cares how their money is spent needs to participate. And it helps if you've met the candidates. And that's why the League is interviewing candidates, those who wanted to be interviewed, and only in the contested races. For each race, the candidates will get the same basic questions and will have the same amount of time to answer them. So let's begin.
Hello, I'm Nan Dunford, a member of the League of Women Voters of Berks County. Two candidates are competing to be judge of the Court of Common Pleas. They are Democrat Eric J. Taylor and Republican Kathryn Lehman. Voters across the county will vote for one. The Court of Common Pleas hears trials of major criminal and civil matters. It hears matters involving children and families. It hears appeals from minor courts. The term of the office is 10 years, and the current salary is $227,411. Please note the opinions expressed in this interviews are those of the candidate and not the opinions of the League of Women Voters or of Berks Community Television. This interview is with Kathryn Lehman. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, Kathryn, please tell our viewers why you were seeking this important office.
Thank you. I am seeking this position because I am a lifelong Berks County resident. I grew up right here in Exeter Township, and I love Berks County. The Court of Common Pleas is a trial judge position, and I think it's really important that our next judge has trial experience, and that's something that I can bring to the table because there are real people, real victims, and real defendants in these cases, and they need to make sure that as a community we are serving both the defendants and the victims.
Thank you. What education and life experience would you bring to this position?
So like I said, I graduated from Exeter High School. I spent my whole elementary, middle school, and high school time at Exeter, and then I went to Shippensburg University where I earned my bachelor's degree. After Shippensburg, I went to Boston College and I earned my master's in social work. While I was earning my master's in social work and throughout law school, I was working with delinquent teenagers, working to keep them in the home and stop, obviously, their delinquent behaviors. I then went to law school at night at Widener University in Harrisburg while still working full-time with those troubled teens. So I can bring just a very diverse background from social work into the law industry. And so I started as a social worker. I then spent about 5 years as a public defender here in Berks County. And now I'm in the district attorney's office where I've been for about 9 years, and I'm a supervisor of the drug task force there. And I handle a lot of our violent crime cases. So I bring a very diverse perspective to our court system.
You do. What personal qualities do you have that would help you be an effective judge?
So I think the biggest quality, if I had to give one big one, would be I'm hardworking. I'm diligent in my work, I'm thorough in my work, and if I don't know something, I'm prepared. So if I'm elected judge, what attorneys and what the community can expect from me is that in any case that I'm presiding over, I would be prepared when I come out on the bench. I will always be on time. I will always be available to the attorneys, to the parties of the case, and I will be prepared in whatever proceeding that we're there for.
How would you explain to citizens called for jury duty the critical importance of them serving?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
That is, jury duty is our civic duty. As someone who, I prosecute a lot of cases, I've defended a lot of cases, and this system cannot work without jurors. We cannot have this system where we are asking jurors to come in and find an either individual involved in a case, whether it's a med mal case or a criminal case. We have to have jurors who come from every different background, every different ethnic group, background, socioeconomic status, because we need people of their peers to be able to do that. As I mentioned, I work in the district attorney's office. I prosecute a lot of cases, a lot of murder cases, a lot of major drug cases, and we need jurors who can come in, be fair and impartial, and listen to the evidence and make a decision based on the law and the evidence that they heard. Because without them, we can't do our job. We can't work to keep the community safe. We can't, help people, like I said, whether it's a medical malpractice or a business dispute. We can't do that without jurors, so it's critical.
It is. After a judge listens to conflicting evidence, she or he has to make a decision about the facts, about what happened. What factors will you consider in making your decision as if elected judge?
Sure. So the judge and the attorneys are bound by the rules of evidence, and that decides what evidence can come into the court system, what evidence the jury can hear, what evidence the judge can hear. And that's why having that trial experience is so important. I'm the only candidate with extensive jury trial experience. I'm the only candidate who uses those rules of evidence on a daily basis. And so if I'm elected judge, I will have that background to be able to know evidence that is allowed to come in, evidence that should have been excluded, and that way the judge and the jury, quite frankly, is hearing the appropriate information, no more, no less than what they are allowed by law to do. This position, the Court of Common Pleas, is a trial judge position. The judge is the controller of what evidence comes through. So what I would use to make, if there's conflicting testimony, is what evidence is allowed. And then it comes down to credibility of witnesses. And that's really the attorney's job, is to focus on, to prove if somebody isn't telling the truth, but it's ultimately up to the judge to decide what evidence can come in under the rules of evidence, the criminal procedure, rules of civil procedure. And that's critical to have that experience of doing it, and that's what I do every day.
There's a fair amount of complexity to that question.
There's a lot of complexity to that question, yes.
In sentencing convicted criminals, this comes to a human question as well as a circumstantial question. So in sentencing, what factors should be considered, and what might be an alternative to a jail that might be appropriate in, maybe reach back to your background and give an example?
So I do think that my background gives a very unique perspective to that. Like I said, I was a social worker, I was a public defender, and now I'm a prosecutor. There are sentencing factors that the state has outlined for us. So things to consider: a prior record score, what we call the offense gravity score, and that is looking at the different offenses. So something like a retail theft is graded, given a number that's a little bit lower than obviously a murder or a rape. And then based on prior record score, that offense, they give you a range. And that is something that the judge must consider. Now, obviously there's mitigation and aggravating factors that a judge can consider. And so there are plenty of alternatives to incarceration. In my daily work, violent crime we need incarceration. We have to keep the community safe. But those are cases like murders and shootings and armed robberies where victim security is really important. But the other part of that is for those lower level offenses, we need to make sure that we're working on rehabilitation so that way we're not putting a huge burden on the taxpayers. It's expensive to incarcerate someone. So if it's a revolving door, we need to make sure that we're providing them with the services, whether it be drug and alcohol treatment, mental health treatment, because without that, it's a burden on the taxpayer.
People expect legislators and governors to be political. The role of the court is to read and interpret the law without political bias. But that's not how people see the courts. Let's take a few minutes for some civic education. So a question is, Pennsylvanians have a unified court system. A code of ethics applies to all judges. Please share with our viewers what is the code and what you, both as a candidate and as a judge, can and cannot do under that code.
So it's the judicial canons, which is the ethics of a judge. Attorneys have ethics as well, but the judge is held to a higher standard, and rightfully so. The judicial canons are there for the public. It's there to ensure the impartiality of the judge, so that way we can ensure that a judge is doing their job appropriately without bias. The canons are also there to avoid that political affiliation. This position is not political, and if we make it so, we're really ruining our system that we've worked so hard on. This position, like I said, is if you're coming in for jury duty. So you don't want a judge that is asking a defendant, how are you registered? Because that's going to influence evidence that comes in. You don't want to know how a victim is registered. And so those canons are there to ensure that the judge can do their job without fear of being voted out, or the community comes against them because they've had to make a really tough decisions. But those canons are also there so that way the public has trust in our system.
Thank you. Some people want a law and order judge, and some people want judges who focus on justice. How do you view those two ideas, and how will your view impact your decisions if elected?
Like I mentioned, I think it's very easy to get caught up in one way of thinking law and order or justice. But I think if we take a step back and look at what I do every day is I prosecute crime. So I have a real victim who has come in and likely told me one of the worst days of their life. But on the other end of that is a real person who is accused of doing something that's generally pretty heinous. And so we have to still keep that human element behind it. So to say it has to be law and order, it has to be justice, that's just not real life. We need to evaluate a case on a case-by-case basis. And that's what I do every day. It's really important that we recognize the rehabilitation plus the community safety aspect of the position, and make sure that everyone is working towards the betterment of themselves and the community. And I know that sounds like a really hard task, but I think as a judge you have that ability to work towards that by hearing both sides, by sentencing appropriately, and taking into consideration what the victim says, but also the defendant's background and what they're bringing to the table.
Under what circumstances would you recuse yourself as a judge from a case?
So the obvious one is anytime you know a party involved, or anytime that you have a close relationship with maybe the attorney involved in that case. But I think the less obvious one is when there's the appearance of impropriety. When there's an appearance of a conflict, I think it's really important that the judge recuse themselves. This isn't a county where we only have one or two judges. We have plenty of judges in Berks County that we can remove ourselves from a situation that would call into question, just like you asked about those judicial canons. There's ethical standards that the judge must hold themselves to, and so if the community can't have trust that the judge will remove themselves, or that the judge appears to not have removed themselves, that's when you need to remove yourself before it gets to that point of mistrust in the system.
This is a somewhat related question. What can you do on and off the bench to build trust in the courts?
So the courtrooms are open, and I think that is really important. There has to be transparency. The community has to know what is going on in the courtroom. Not only when the crime is committed, but they need to know how those cases are handled after somebody has been charged. What type of sentence was given, how the proceeding went, because again, that's the only way that we can ensure that our judges are living up to those judicial canons, living up to those ethical standards.
The president judge assigns new judges to the areas of the court that need a judge. Please tell us about the different areas of the court and which one you'd most like to serve in if you had the choice, and tell us why you would choose that.
So there's 4 different divisions of the court system in the Court of Common Pleas level. There's the civil court, which is where, like I said, a business dispute or you're suing the hospital for malpractice or something of that nature. There's family court, so if there's custody issues or divorce proceedings. There's the criminal court system, which is if you're charged with a crime or a victim of a crime. And then there's a juvenile court system, so anyone under the age of 18 who's charged with a crime. As you mentioned, our president judge makes that assignment. I don't have a strong preference, but I think I would be most suited for civil or family. I think I would need to remove myself from criminal cases because of the work that I do currently. But civil cases follow the same rules of evidence. And so that's something that I'm very comfortable to go in and handle right from day one, where I can proceed over a civil trial using those same rules of evidence that I'm very comfortable using right now.
Other than family and friends, how are you funding your campaign? Have you received any large donations?
So I have been funding my campaign through fundraisers. So I've hosted several fundraisers prior to the primary, and then after the primary, I actually had one just last weekend, I have one this weekend, and I have one at the end of the month. I've received a lot of donations. I can't say any of them have been of substantial size, but my husband and I have worked very hard knowing that this was coming to be able to fund our campaign as much as possible. And there are very strict rules when it comes to where a judicial candidate can accept their funds for their campaign.
We're kind of running into the time crunch, but let's move on. Are you involved in volunteer community work? And tell us a little about it.
Sure. So my husband and I are active members of our church. We're active members of the Onalani Grange, and I am the president of the Berks County Field Hockey Officials, and I am an active official. So that's for all of Berks County. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Tell us a little bit about everything you'd like to say in a closing statement. We have a couple of minutes.
Okay. So I am asking to be your next Court of Common Pleas judge. The position I'm running for, as I've mentioned several times, is a trial judge position. I'm the only candidate with extensive trial experience, and that's really important to the community because there's a good chance that most members of our community aren't going to come into court because they've been victims of a crime or charged with a crime or suing a business, but they are going to come into our court system as a member of jury duty. And so I think it's really important for our community to understand when they're there to make a serious decision that's going to impact at least two people's lives, whether it's the defendant or the victims. It's really important that the appropriate evidence has come in under the rules of evidence and that they can make an informed decision about the law. That's what I do every day, and I can bring that experience to the courtroom. I'm also endorsed by our district attorney, John Adams, the City of Reading Fraternal Order Police, the Pennsylvania State Police, the County of Berks Police, Eric Weeknick, and the Plumbers Union. And I think those endorsements, they go a long way to show my work ethic and what I'm willing to bring to Berks County. I'm willing to bring my whole heart, and I'm willing to be here every day and show up for the members of Berks County.
Have you thought about being a judge for a few years?
That was not something that was in the cards. It's not something that I thought I would ever do, but I think it's really important, as, like I said, as a lifelong Berks County resident, to give back to our community. And I feel like this is a natural step for me, because I work very hard in the district attorney's office, but I know that there's more of me to give to Berks County, and I'm looking forward to that opportunity.
Well, thank you, Kathryn Lehman,
Yes.
for sharing your views with us. Voters, please remember, there's another candidate for Judge of the Court of Common Pleas, Eric J. Taylor. You may vote for one. You will find candidates' upfront interviews on BCTV and its website and YouTube page. For more information or more candidates, go to the League's online voters guide, vote.pa.gov. For more information on election procedures, contact our wonderful Berks County Election Services. Elections at BerksPA.gov, telephone number 610-478-6491. And remember that if you are voting in person, polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. If there's a line of waiting voters at 8 p.m., the polls will stay open until all have voted. You, the voter, are hiring people for specific jobs. Job descriptions for all the positions on the ballot are on the league-lined voters guide, vote411.org. Thank you for watching Candidates Up Front.